Are we live? We're live. Okay, great. I'm charging. That'll be probably the last one I do on the new desk. The reason is that I like this background with the weird angles more than the stuff I have behind my desk. Um, but yeah, I'll do the desk like tomorrow. I need to comb my beard. I need to get some olive oil in there. No, at any rate, we have four movies to talk about solo. No Will D today. I think Will D is might be a thing of the past. He's a good guy in his way, but he can be a bit cumbersome when it comes to pacing and getting the ball moving for an hour and 15 to 2 hour podcast window. And he's a good guy again, but I just don't think I can talk about every little movie bullet point with someone who hasn't really seen the movies he was assigned or agreed to watch at the very least. And he just sort of doesn't really understand business, even at the minimal level that I understand it, which is really kind of shitty. So I mean, if his business sense is worse than mine, which I'm not saying it is, but it could be because there's evidence that it could very well be worse. Anyway, no more trashing him. He's a good guy. I'm a little heartbroken. I wish he had more of a stomach for this, but again, no one watches these things, so I just gotta focus on content. Uh, episode. So we got four movies, and they're kind of a mix of two themes, but these four all stand out. One of them is very clearly about the last Native American members of a tribe who get uh, tragically wiped out and have to fend for themselves in sort of a last ditch effort to maintain peace amid some glory. And they sort of moments of dignity combined with moments of frustration and a lot of loss and destruction as well. Really, just mayhem. That's Last of the Mohicans. It's a '90s film. Stars Daniel Day Lewis. It's directed by Michael Mann. So random. He's known more for Heat, and I think was it so he did the Ferrari movie. What did he do? He did some stuff recently, but he's really known for Heat. There's an '80s movie called Thief from 1980 with James Caan, which is quite good. Although I would say Last of the Mohicans is a bit, it's a higher octave in its melodic power. It's more you can hear the notes move around. It's more sonorous. So Last of the Mohicans, just to keep you in pace. Last of the Mohicans is it's kind of like almost like a Hispanic version of the Patriot, where there's like in the Patriot, this guy that's the other movie in this comparison is Mel Gibson's The Patriot, starring Mel Gibson. I don't think he directed it, but he might have. It's a pretty good movie. We're also doing another one called Apocalypto. It was directed by Mel Gibson. Very good movie. I think perhaps his best directorial feature film. And another one we're going to do is 1492 Conquest of Paradise. And the way this is working, if you can't already tell, is we're doing Revolutionary War, sort of French Canadian War era slash Revolutionary War era, from white guy perspective, but then we're also doing one from like indigenous or Hispanic perspective. Then we're doing two where it's Conquest of New World from white guy perspective, and then we're doing one indigenous perspective slash Hispanic. But I guess it would really be not Hispanic that early in 1492. Um, and so Ridley Scott, one of my all-time favorite directors. I'm sure if you like film, he's one of yours too. Even if you don't know it, made so many great movies. 1492 is one that flies way under the radar. I haven't met anyone who really felt like they needed to sing its praises. I haven't met a lot of people that really seen it. I mean, it's probably considered one of his more disappointing films to fans. I don't. really care. I think it's phenomenal, and especially phenomenal is the way they portray the main character, Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus in that movie is kind of innocent, and you get immediately a sense of why he's innocent. It's very sympathetic to him, and I think the reason it works is because he uh he kind of fails a lot, but then when he succeeds, he's very emotional. And then when he also fails, he's like emotional about that. He's just emotional throughout the whole movie, and you get the feeling that he kind of is sort of in he's sort of in the theater to his own life, like he's sort of just being pulled by other people. Whereas if you read, the high school textbooks and stuff, they'll make it seem like he was like very brash. He probably was at times. At times he probably was very brash, and at times he was probably super brash. And at times he was probably excruciatingly brash. I'm just saying that that perspective is very like focused on derogatory depiction of him. But if you watch this movie, it shows him as kind of like just sort of mesmerized by the adventure that he's in, and that's cool. I hadn't seen a perspective like that. I think it's a much needed perspective because it lends to balance. Uh, on sort of the flippy flop side, you have Apocalypto, which is a film that's less about all these Europeans going over and sort of risking personal injury and wasting a lot of time and money that doesn't belong to them. They're wasting that too. There's none of that. It's all about tribes sort of being invaded and conquered by, I believe, the Aztec. I mean, it's probably more like Mayan, but geographically, it's like the Mayan society is adjacent to their small village, and they don't really. It's like very authentic. Like they don't wear clothing, and they use like sort of contraptions made of like like yarn that they fabricate out of tree leaves and branches and bark and all these pieces of nonsense. But they do it, and they they use it to like hunt in the forest and set traps for like jaguars and all sorts of crazy animals and chickens. I don't know, birds that they eat, stuff like that. Pigs. I have no idea. But like the movie is fundamentally about the oppositional dichotomy where you have really innocent small village jungle dwellers in the Yucatan, I suppose. Although not quite sure where it's supposed to be, but it's like the mainland. It's not an island. I know that much. And then you have, the temple, the Aztec temple. Maybe it's Tenochtitlan, maybe it's Chichen Itza. I don't know where it was really, but they have sacrifices there, and they have a god who is not a god; it's the king or whatever, Montezuma figure. It's not very clear who he is, but he has ruthless power, and he wields it constantly. And the film does lend to a lot of violence. It's more violent than 1492, Conquest of Paradise. Sometimes they call it Conquest of the Paradise because it just sounds funnier. But yeah, it's more. 1492 is a little more whitewashed and emotional and political, and there's a lot of moments where Columbus is in Spain and he's meets with delegates, and they all kind of give an impression to him of what their intentions are, and he sort of overthinks it and opposes. And then it goes back to him adventuring out in the new world, and he makes a mess, but he also has moments of glory. But overall, it's kind of a disaster. And you get the sense that this guy really is changing the world, but he's sort of like in the back seat to it all, and it's very empathetic and sort of poignant at times. And the cinematography is really actually lush and bright and sort of it feels a lot different than when I would have made a movie. If I ever made a movie like that, I don't think I would have had the imagination that the DP had for that. Not by any means. It was really a well studied uh, representation of, I guess it's the Dominican Republic now, right? Because that was where he landed first. It wasn't Puerto Rico, I believe it was Dominican Republic. And he does go on multiple expeditions, and he ages throughout the film. And eventually, you get the sense that like his sons are involved in the movie, in the cast, and uh, they're Columbus's sons are kind of not the Columbus's sons are not really the most like uh Yeah, Columbus's sons are not really, the most intelligent people, but they're very gung ho, and they want to help Cristobal Colombo, or whatever they call him. And he's Italian, and everyone's Spanish. And as an Italian, he kind of sticks out from all the other people in the colony. And it's a very small colony. What gets really interesting is when rival aristocrats join up in later expedition, the second expedition it was, and they sort of feud with Columbus over power. They struggle, right? And they get the natives to side with them against Columbus, which means if news goes back to the first world or whatever, the old world, news to the old world, right? News goes back to the old world that Columbus fucked up his management. Now they want to ixnay him, and then the film ends up being about Columbus sort of falling out of grace. It was and he really is. They really kind of confront him about his failures, but he doesn't pause. He doesn't um, need to take time to remind people that, like, he basically without a beat reminds people that no one would be anywhere without him, because he really started the whole thing. But it is sad that he is sort of a faded glory, even sort of midway through the film. He seems like faded glory. And the actor, I forget the actor's name in 1492, Conquest of Paradise, but really skilled. Um, yeah, he portrays Columbus to the point where it's like a little scary, because I don't know if it's accurate, but I thought it was intact, uh, well worth watching. Like at all. Apocalypto again. Apocalypto was a more suave, even keeled, adventurous sort of action-packed movie. It's an action adventure. It doesn't really have like a story. The story is that this family gets thrown apart, and a lot of the villagers are murdered. It's not really a village. It's like like a swamp kind of hut land, and they're all like peaceful and like they're in love with each other, and the whole world is dancing merrily on end. And I think that's very beautiful. But then, of course, it's tarnished by the destruction that the neighboring kingdom sort of brings in. And at the end, there's a whole fell swoop with the Crusaders landing, or sorry, not Crusaders, the Conquistadors land. And the Conquistadors are not in the movie, but there's like a last scene with them in it, and it shows you that the natives are kind of like they don't know what they're in for, but they're curious to find out. And that movie was less poignant, but it was a lot more vigilant, and it had a lot more um, purposeful action going on. I think it was a faster paced movie. If that's your cup of tea, it's better. In fact, that movie was more like coffee. Conquest of Paradise was more like a cup of tea. That's the best way I can compare it. The other thing is they have the Patriot, and the Patriot is really Mel Gibson playing some sort of um, farmer. He has a lot of money, so he has a lot of land, so he has a big farm, and he has all these. He's a widower, and he has all these sons, and it's a little drenched in sappy sort of fatherhood nonsense. He's got a lot of sons. This British guy shows up. The war has started. He's a patriot. He believes in America, the colonies. Doesn't believe in King George's tyranny. Doesn't believe in poll taxes or stamp taxes, acts of taxes or whatever. He doesn't believe in any of that taxes here, taxes there crap. So he says no and decides to join the Continental Army, and the Continental Army agrees. And he's not like a real person in history, but he fights some battles here and there, mostly guerrilla tactics and small scale skirmishes, and wins some acclaim. But the problem is that this British guy, I think he's played by Lucius Malfoy, like the guy who plays Lucius Malfoy. He's a really good actor. He's British. He's actually extremely British, and so what makes the movie work. And he hates this man, and he goes after him time and time again, to the point that he literally just full on murders his kids just because he wants to prove that he can hurt the guy. And so throughout the movie, he just keeps killing one more and more sons. And by the end of the movie, there's a little. He burns like a church down at one point with people in it. So he's really just naughty. He's not a good person. He's basically the incarnation of downright evilness. And he goes around doing all that, and it gets to the point where the eldest son of Mel Gibson's character, whose name is like, I mean, Mel Gibson's character's name is like Nathan or something. But his son is named like Ben, and Ben goes in. It's the classic son name, right? Ben, and Ben goes in and beats the British Lord General in a fair fight, nearly kills him, then goes to check up on the body. British Lord turns over, stabs him with, I think, a bayonet. It might not have been a bayonet. It might have been, like a saber. And so he kills him, and immediately Mel Gibson pops in the screen, yelling, screaming, and he's like, "Well, that can't be. No, my last son." And that was the last son. All the other ones were killed by the same guy, one way or another, a different, locations in that whole Pennsylvania Valley area, wherever they were. Can't remember the exact area. It was like one. It was like Valley Forge or some shit. And needless to say, despite it being a really like sappy flick, but when he does duke it out at the end with the English Lord, he says like he almost wins, but basically loses. The English Lord says, "Clearly, you're not the better man. You said you would have killed me before the war is over. Clearly, you're not the better man." And you remember the beginning of the film that he said, "Before this war is over, I will kill you," to the British guy. And Mel Gibson never kills him. So by the time he says this, "You didn't kill me. Why didn't you kill me?" The guy, Mel Gibson, takes seizes the day, turns around, just stabs him, and he says, "You're right. I'm not the better man. My sons were better men." And so, out of some sort of passionate loyalty to his dead children, he decides to kill the guy, knowing, I think, that that guy was probably a better fighter on the field, but Mel Gibson saw that that guy kind of hated himself, and he tricked him and won. And it's a lot like the movie Rob Roy that we discussed earlier in this channel, with Liam Neeson doing essentially the same thing, and probably a few years earlier in the cinema history. And it's a very intense sort of like homage to his children, but he also leaves you thinking like, man, like how many guys had to, see their whole world fall apart in order to kill some bad guy that ravaged the landscape, burned churches, killed innocent people left and right, marauded, farms, and ports and villages. How many guys like that had to be killed by some dude who really lost everything in the process. He lost it all in the process in order to get his vendetta. He vanquished the enemy. I mean, it's a very whitey, tidy film. Even probably whiter than 1498, 92, frankly. But what I will say is that, I don't know, say it before we end this, is that the best movie in some ways is Last Mohican, especially the ending of Last Mohicans, because they're being stalked, persistently stalked by a Mohawk Indian with his gang of, underlings, and they don't like the Mohican tribe. But at this point, the Mohican tribe is like three people, four, whatever. It's like almost ever diminishing for years, almost non-existent. But they know that this old man and his son and the white guy hangs out with them are kind of like quote unquote the Mohicans. So they flop around all over the place, stalking them day and night, and they kind of get interceded on by like the actual French and Indian warfare. Like there's battles with like English royalty, because the English in this movie, this isn't the Revolutionary War, right? It's the war right before. So the English are the good guys, and there is no like continental army. There's no American army, right? It's just English versus French, and a bunch of Native Americans taking different sides depending on their allegiance, tribal allegiance. Um, so you have this sort of context of warfare. But the film is really about this James Fenimore Cooper story that's really old, from like I think the 1800s, like the early, not late, but early 1800s. And Natty Bumppo is the character in the book. In this, he has some other name. He's played by Daniel Day Lewis. He's basically a white guy. He's the star of the movie, Daniel Day Lewis, but he's a white guy that grew up with the natives and speaks their language fluently and knows all their tricks, and is kind of has the same status as they do in most interactions with other natives. So he's kind of like, you know, like really cool is I guess the best way to put it. He's like this really cool enigma in the colonial society. And there are other people around like that, but he was certainly interesting because there's a very small tribe, and he was a white guy, and he was kind of an honorary member to a very small tribe. They're being stalked. This gang of three, and the movie kind of blows in a way because it's about all this interceding warfare that has not a lot of political baggage in America. So you're just sort of watching like antiquated warfare going on, and then by the end of it, their women kind of get swept up into this small gang, and there's even like a captain in the British Army, the Royal Army, right? Who a red coat, who helps, and he's really nice, and he becomes friends with Daniel Day Lewis, and there's like a band of friends, but again, they're stalked, and in the end, they reach some sort of powwow where they talk to the elder in the Indian tribe conference, and he's like agrees that someone did something wrong. One of the white people has to be burned, and the fake Native American guy he talks in the language, and he convinces them to take the women, take me, and they're kind of listening to him, like, okay, I see that. And by the way, they're doing it for retribution with the Mohawk guy. The Mohawk guy is kind of a menacing dude. He's really scary. He shows up, and when he shows up, he's always demanding things. And he goes to the elder and demands that one of these people be sacrificed or sold into slavery. And so they agree to sell the white women into slavery. But then the guy intercedes and says, "Take me, like I'm more important." And then they sort of agree, like, "Okay, we'll take the white man instead." But rather than let that happen, the Englishman doesn't find this honorable, I believe, and he says, "No, take me." And he starts yelling it, and then in the last ditch effort to just seal the deal, the tribe chieftain just grabs the Englishman and starts burning him at the stake. And they all run off, and they're like sort of shoot him from a distance to take him out of his misery. But they burn him at the stake. The Englishman dies, and the rest of them run over to, and he was kind of like a soldier, uh, it was because he was the reason, by the way, that they were able to accept him instead of a woman is because he was an officer, so he had like aristocratic title, or he just had some sort of nobility claim, and that meant to the natives that he was worth more than like just a woman that didn't have nobility claim. And so they kill him. They all run off. But meanwhile, the Mohawk guy, who's really fierce and menacing, pursues them because he still wants the kid. He still wants the women. And oh wait, no, no. What it was is that he actually had the women captive. My mistake. And he's running off, and the gang, the good guys, have to go, and the band of brothers, they have to go and take down the evil gang, the Mohawks. They try this, and in the last 10 minutes, it's like the best. I swear to God, it's like one of the best scenes in all film history, where the youngest Indian Mohican goes and tries valiantly to win. He fails. They sort of fall around. He falls around, and then he he kills like six of them, and then eventually he gets to, well, he kills like three. Let's be real. But then he gets to the mean guy with the real mohawk who's done it all, seen it all, and that he tries to fight him, and that guy's too tough, and that guy fucking throws him down, kind of breaks his bones and cuts him up, and kicks him off the cliff. And the dude the whole time is like, how's this guy beating me? Like, I'm a trained warrior, but that guy was a viciously trained warrior and seasoned, and he wasn't really a hunter. The other guy was kind of sort of a hunter slash warrior, But this dude he has no shirt the whole time. It's kind of goofy. He's like a real Mohawk warrior, and he's looking for vengeance. So anyway, this happens, and these guys, the young guy gets kicked off of the cliff down a waterfall. Basically, he's dead, effectively, right? Um, who sees this is the father, and this guy really is the last Mohican. And he sees it. He's running. He's kind of irrelevant. He's kind of just like avuncular and chill, and he doesn't really do a lot of heavy lifting, but he's kind of around to make sure people don't make dumb decisions. He's sort of there to correct course when needed throughout the whole movie. But by this point, he doesn't really know what's going on, and so he does that, right, and so he doesn't really know what's going on, but he runs out to see if he can do something about it. But then the woman decides to jump off the cliff too, out of loyalty to this guy. I don't even know if they had sex, but they might have, right? Out of loyalty, she just decides to jump off the cliff to evade capture. And the guy's like, "What the fuck?" And you can see he's kind of changing. Like, oh, had this woman who was our slave, and then now she just decides to kill herself. And they all kind of get like sad, and they continue to walk past the waterfall. And then meanwhile, all the other members of this evil gang are getting cut up on the other side of the waterfall by the dad and of course the white guy who pretends to be native. They're both running together. It's just the two of them, and there's a woman in the background, but it's the two of them fighting. And they're just grabbing guns, shooting, and they basically kill like four of the natives just on this ledge over the waterfall. And by the time they get to the tough guy, who's like really scary, the tough guy's kind of like, "You really want to fight me, dude? I'm a seasoned badass." And the dude's just the old man who's kind of got this pot belly, just sort of running at him. So he's like, "All right," he wants to fight. And so he draws his knife, does his little move, sachets, and the old man doesn't even really acknowledge him. By the time he gets near, he just he kind of barrel roll somersaults. He somersaults right past him. The guy turns around like, "Why'd you somersault?" And then immediately he does some weird kind of agility trick where he swings his war club, knocks that dude over on his ass, and then he immediately stands up from the somersault, and that guy's kind of like on his knees, and he breaks his fucking shoulder, so he can't use his knife. And that dude's like, "You just disarmed me with like that somersault bullshit." Like it looked like a fucking like little kid thing. It was so effortless. And by the way, the music that's playing, I can't remember if it was James Horner or Patrick Doyle. It was a major composer. Some of the best music you could get in the end sequence for a film. And by the end of this fight, it lasts almost like no time at all. He totally avenges his son's death he just witnessed, and he just runs in circles around this basically ultimate badass character. This Indian, he runs in circles around him, showing that he actually kind of pities him. And that although this old man was someone that wasn't really expected to be a great warrior, when push came to shove, he knew how warfare burdened anyone. And it was one of those moments where you realize warfare is not about your physicality so much as it is about strategy. And where strategy, it's not just the mind, but it's in the heart. And when betrayal is on display, strategy doesn't just stay the same. Strategy will change. And there's a very like sort of mesmerizing quality to this last 10 minutes. And of course, by the end of it, he doesn't have a son anymore. He kills this bad guy. The girl threw herself off the cliff. It's just him, the fake son who's, chill, but he's not a blood Indian. And then a woman who's kind of now going to be the girlfriend. And this is all based off a novel, so there's going to be these characters just lingering for no reason. But the old man is kind of like, yeah, now I'm the last of the fucking Mohicans because they're all dead. And it's really tender, poignant, whatever you want to say. It's very expressive, but it's also like somber. It makes you think this character spent the whole movie just sort of watching his son do the work, and at the end of it, his son tries to save this girl just out of honor. He just got over his head slightly, but it was enough to lose his life. And then he had to fucking actually snap into it and be like, "There is no hope for our people." Yeah, okay, I killed that guy. Whatever. He was a turd. but we're done. The Mohicans are done. And so you get this display of sort of beauty in combat that you'd never really see in a movie. It's so elegant, the choreography and the background noise and the music. And it's very very tender. But then you realize, yeah, like it was all kind of sound and fury signifying nothing, wasn't it? And so that was the last of the Mohicans. And I say the movie is not that great, but the last 10 minutes is like piece de la resistance. It's or whatever, creme de la creme. I don't have the word for it. It's kind of like they just saved it all for the tail end of the thing. Like, they just saved it all for the end. And so he really just somersaults and does a fucking kicks the guy over, and before the guy can just stand up, he knocks his fucking arm out of its socket. So that guy's his knife doesn't work, and that's how he kills the dude. And that dude probably would have that dude probably would have won in just like a standard knife to knife fight because he probably was a faster, stabber or whatever. He was probably faster with a bladed weapon, but that dude just saw his last son die. He doesn't give a fuck about tactics and weapons and how cool it would be to win with the cooler weapon. He just wanted that guy gone so he could just sit on the ledge and cry because his entire race of people were obliterated. So you see like the whole world in a fucking grain of sand. It's like, or a teardrop or whatever. So yeah, those are the four movies, and I mean, they're all. I know it sounds really disheveled talking about all four, but you can see the lines of continuity. The Patriot, he's avenging his sons. Last Mohicans, he's not white, but he's still doing the same. He's the same landscape, and he's avenging his sons. The 1492, it's the New World, and there's this wonder to it. It's magnificent, but it's kind of whitewashed, right? And then Apocalypto, it's about you know indigenous people, and there is a wonder to it, but it's also got this insecurity because it doesn't have the comforts of sort of the European society and the modern industry, and it doesn't really have the appliances that we appreciate. So you're kind of scared of the whole world's very scary and unreliable, even if it is punctuated with extreme moments of joy and community. And so that is the indigenous pre-Columbian society in a nutshell. And that was the purpose of that movie. All right, so we're at 32 minutes. I think it's pretty good. I already announced a lot in my last video. I think for the next Cinema Breve, I'll try to do either some more westerns or some more kind of European flicks, maybe some Sicilian mobster movies, stuff that's a little more um, macho and not so focused on genocide and extreme familial loss during wartime. All right, good night and good luck, and have a brilliant tomorrow morning. We could all use it. Ciao.